Sometimes the one thing that we do or don't do makes most of the impact. How many of you have a to-do list? Kelly talks about getting rid of that, and I was very convicted because it's been on my mind a while. Because a lot of times we get to doing. But how many know you can still do a whole lot of things and still be nowhere? Yeah. You can do everything and still do nothing. You can go everywhere and still get nowhere, because sometimes we get so distracted by the number of things we're trying to accomplish in life that we've not yet learned how to focus on. Somebody shout for one thing. One thing. So Paul reminds us in this letter that he writes to this church at Philippi, and I'm going to give you a few things that I think that in our spiritual journey that we should never, ever forget about one thing. As he writes to this church, he says, I do not consider myself to have apprehended, but there's one thing I do. He's reminding us that he has not arrived. Anybody here know that we haven't arrived yet? Yeah. Come on now. When we get to a spot where we really think we've arrived, we have really messed up. It's a journey. We never arrive. We never should stop growing. We never should stop learning. Paul, who writes the text, the apostle most used by God, born out of, as he calls it, a due season. He's an apostle born out of due season. God uses him to write literally about 2/3 of the New Testament. He says, I've not made it yet. I still sin. I still fall short. I still make mistakes. I still mess up. He says, but there's one thing I do. He says, I forget those things which are behind. And how I love him for sharing that. Because I don't know about you, but there's some things in my life, and I'm sure you might relate, that you got to forget. You got to remember to forget some stuff. Some of us have some folk that literally we've kept our focus and we kept our eye on them for so long, and they ought to be past. Come on now. We ought to consider it history. There are some relationships that if they remain at all, we got to distance ourselves. Anybody got some fake friends? Come on, let's just be real. Anybody got some family that just don't act like family all the time? Am I by myself? No. Anybody got some folk that you thought they would be the first ones to support you, but they're nowhere to be found? There's some things in all of our lives that we got to see past. They're in our past, and they're not to go with us into the future. Paul says you gotta know that you've not arrived, and you got to understand that some things behind you. But he says, this is what I do. This one thing I do. Forgetting those things which are behind